So I am Kate Wardin, and I'm an engineering manager at Target Corporate. So if you're not familiar with us, we are a large retailer here with over 1,800 stores and a .com presence. So yeah, hopefully you're doing some Black Friday shopping with us, as well as Wayfair, obviously, our wonderful hosts. All right, so Target is based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, so I traveled here last night. My second time in Boston. I've really enjoyed my time so far. The weather is just absolutely beautiful. So yeah, Minneapolis, if you haven't been, it's a beautiful place, especially in the winter. You get it piled with snow very frequently. Okay, so yeah, I support a team of front-end engineers who build the supply chain React apps for Target. And so we have many headquarters facing and also field facing, so apps that we use in our warehouses too. And so in addition to my day job, my passion for technology leadership also led me to founding Developer First, which is an organization that provides new leaders with the resources, tools, and then confidence to be great leaders in technology. And so I promise I'll explain a lot more about that later. But I just kind of want to start, like, how many engineering managers or tech leads or senior engineers do we have here who might informally or formally lead people? Okay, awesome. So we have quite a few. Cool. I think that regardless of your title or your role, you'll hopefully find something valuable out of my talk today. Okay, so you might be wondering why I'm here talking about leadership at a React conference, and so I'm going to tell you why I'm here. There's 3 reasons that I'll walk through. So the first is that I became a boss a couple years ago, and I was talking to my mom, this is her and me, about how surprised she was that this role didn't really seem to fit my personality. She went on to tell me some stories of some really awful leaders that she had. She was also in the tech industry, and this was, she's talking about the, 1980s. She's an independent woman. She's the first one to graduate college. And this is a really hard time to be in tech as a woman. And I was like, man, your boss should be the last one from really encouraging you to leave the workforce at that time. And so I started thinking about the impact that bad bosses can have on an individual in technology, and realizing it's a really powerful opportunity to help people feel confident in their roles. And so I want to do the best that I can. And so that's kind of the first reason, is just acknowledging that people like my mom, people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. Just how many? I did some research and found that actually 50% of respondents, according to a 2017 Gallup study, said that they had left a job because of the boss at the time. And this is actually a study of 27 million different employees on 2.5 million different teams in almost 200 different countries. So it's a pretty global issue that we're looking at here. All right, so my second reason is that engineers are picky when choosing where to work. So looking at our industry specifically, by 2020, there'll be about 70,000 people graduating with computer science degrees, and this is in the United States. But also by 2020, there's going to be about 700,000 open roles for software developers. Okay, so that's 10 times the amount of open roles. So as organizations, we are really going to have competition as these folks are graduating, and also a lot of people are coming into the industry from different backgrounds, so boot camps and self-taught, which is amazing, but we're just going to have so many more people coming in, and they're going to have a lot of options on where to work, okay? And so we have to figure out really how to attract these people as organizations, and also how to retain them. So we have to figure out, how do we stand out as an organization? And then also really focusing on retention and keeping people happy. Because retention rates are actually at an all-time low right now. 1 in 4 workers will quit their jobs this year for various reasons to try something new. And they say that by 2020, this is actually going to be 1 in 3. That they say that the time that software developers are enrolled too is getting shorter and shorter, so about 2 years to 2.5 years. And as organizations, we really can't afford to ignore this. $11 billion is lost annually due to employee turnover, and 75% of these causes is actually, they say, preventable. Okay, so second reason done. Third reason is I've witnessed several new managers, including myself, really struggle with that psychological and emotional shift when you go from being an individual contributor to leading a group of people. And so, for myself, it was a Friday, I was on the same team, and then I came back the next Monday, suddenly leading the same group of people who I was working alongside before. And I didn't have any tools or training or a 90-day plan that I could go through to figure out really how to be a great and effective boss for engineers. It's awesome if your company already provides this, but in doing research, I'm finding that this isn't really common. And in fact, only 40% of people do receive formal training when they become a boss for the first time. And so I really wanted to come up with resources and, like I said, tools, different skill sets to help other people in the same situation be more confident and be better leaders for engineers in their roles. Okay, and so to recap, here are the 3 reasons why I'm here and why this topic is especially important to me. And so, number 1, 50% of people leave bad managers. Number 2, people have a lot of options when choosing where to work. And then number 3, there's really this lack of training for new engineering managers and leaders. Okay, so an agenda. I'm going to talk about why we are here, which is already done. What is developer-first leadership? And then what are some techniques that you can apply to your teams? So I want to start by just talking about why bosses get a bad rap. I think a lot of things naturally stem from the media that we're exposed to. They're those degrading leaders, they're task givers, they're intimidating, they're the Bill Lumbergs of the world, or they're just like relentlessly cruel and cold. We've all had those kind of leaders. And so I think, when you don't have that formal training, you just kind of emulate what you see in the media, right? And there's also some really admirable tech companies taking strong stances by seeing what happens when they do flatten their organizations and just remove managers. Another reason I think we do promote our best engineers who probably shouldn't be people leaders, but we want to give them a path forward to continue growing in their organizations. I'm a firm believer that you can apply tech skills to many, many different industries and jobs, but it's really hard to apply tech skills to leadership and leading people. Okay, so we could just give up and just not have managers. The company that I admire most, they test things out and then they report back to us. And so they wrote an awesome article about what they learned from flattening one of their organizations. And I liked this because I think it summed it up well, is that without managers, people were left searching for basic answers to questions and needs, as well as guidance in important areas such as career advice. Okay, so this makes me kind of think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and let's just assume that the things like psychological safety, food, shelter, those are already met when they get to work. Now our new foundation of support is really just that support that they talked about, like answers to basic questions and needs, being that sounding board, just providing them that foundation to go on and do those cool things that we need to do, like build technology. And so if we don't provide that solid foundation as leaders, we know that all of the awesome technology that we want them to build isn't possible. I've never got that many laughs from this one. That's great. Okay. Just falling over. Yeah, okay. So that's great for myself and other people who have taken this path. We're here to stay for now. Okay, and so what I've realized is that, in doing this talk dozens of times and talking to different people, is that we do have to start thinking differently about technical leadership. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to solve these problems that I've outlined? We're going to develop awesome leaders. We're going to foster irresistible cultures so that they want to come to our organizations. And then we're also going to equip these leaders with the tools, frameworks, and confidence to be effective. Now I've started testing out some of these ideas and tools on my teams and helping other leaders do the same. And I've already seen some really great results on my teams. So here's a look at kind of some of my metrics, my team's metrics versus the national average for engagement and retention. So I'm really excited to share some of these practices and ideas with you today. Okay, so I want to kind of just get back to that first question that I asked about 40 slides ago, is what is developer-first leadership? And this is a mindset shift that is very simple, but I think is going to help you think differently about your roles as leaders or as tech leads or as more senior level developers, helping junior level developers learn. And that is that I work for my team and not the other way around. All right, so how do we do this? I'm going to go through 7 different ways to practice developer-first leadership starting tomorrow. Now, first, I'd like to go through kind of what's the difference between a manager and a leader, because I'll use those terms interchangeably, and some people ask me. So I just want to cover that right off the bat. Okay, so I think, supervisor, manager, leader, we're all just trying to influence others to get stuff done. But there's some key differences that I see, and so I have to play the manager role sometimes, and then sometimes I get to play that leader role. And so here are things, how I describe the different tasks that a manager or supervisor versus a leader do every day. So manager, supervisor, they have to align people to work to get stuff done. They're explaining goals, plans, and the roles of the team. They're monitoring budget, etc. Whereas a leader really builds strong teams, provides feedback, establishes and shares vision, and then creates culture. So you can read through that slide for more things that I would argue are the differences between those different types of roles. All right, but jumping in here now to my list of 7. So number 1 is to remove blockers that prevent engineers from making progress towards their professional and personal goals. So basically in all my one-on-ones, I'm just collecting a list of things that I can do to help them and not the other way around. So whether it's gathering information from other teams to help them remove a blocker, finding new opportunities for them to grow a specific skill set or learn about a different business area that they're interested in, maybe influencing other teams to remove a blocker that we're facing, or helping them navigate a hard conversation. It can look like a lot of different things. This has honestly just been as simple as changing the way I'm phrasing my questions in one-on-ones. So it's about, what can I help you with, instead of, do you have an update on this? Now, blockers can also disguise themselves as a dynamic amongst the team, and it's my opinion that as the leader, you have to be the one to bring those up. So if you sense there's an issue, then you have to be the one to bring it up. And this is really where it takes that strong emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills that I think some people need to work towards to be a great leader of people. And I also do think this does require you to be present, whether you have remote teams or physical teams, sitting with the team, or just being in those team channels that people are interacting in, and making sure that you can pick up on those interpersonal conflicts that might be happening. All right, blockers can also be low performers. And so this is absolutely the worst and the hardest part of my role. But it's amazing what it can do to morale, both negatively and positively. Negatively when you don't address a low performer, and then positively when you do. And so make sure that you're putting in the work to identify and help that team member work through the gaps. And then finding the opportunities to maybe work on a different team within the organization, or helping them find a new role outside of the organization if it's not working out. I found that you really gain respect from the team if you do address these issues, because you're all high performers. You're at a conference, spending your weekend learning about things, and so you can tell that it's really frustrating when you're a high performer and you have a low performer, frankly, just keeping their job, who's on your team. Okay, the next one, and this is going to sound a little odd, but you do have to let go of your superstars. Another thing that's really hard about my role is watching my A-plus player leave the team, knowing that I was the one who encouraged them to go. I mentioned that the length of time people are on teams is about 2 to 2.5 years. And I've watched some leaders just really try to hold on and bribe their best engineers to stay on their team, even if they're outgrowing that opportunity. And so I want to make sure that I'm giving people opportunity to learn about the skills and the business areas that they're interested in, and not outgrowing their environment. And so how I do this tactically is just in every single one of my statuses. So every other week I'm asking people, are you getting that experience that you want to? Are you learning the new technologies that you want to? Is this business context still interesting to you? And if not, then I find them an opportunity that is going to continue growing them. All right, number 2 is to empower your team. And this requires that we ensure that decisions are made at the level where the best information is available. At Target, we have a process called Best Team Survey, where we basically collect feedback upwards, so everyone has an opportunity to share what's going well, what's not going well, etc. And we always hear this message loud and clear, regardless of the year. So we're always working to improve this. One of the comments this year was that it's disempowering to feel like something is being done to us instead of us in the driver's seat. And I can absolutely relate. I'm sure you can. Sometimes, we feel like the people who are living this stuff day in and day out aren't really being heard. There's decisions being made that we feel like we can't really influence and be a part of. And so how do we tactically address this? A couple of things that have worked for me are to, number 1, make sure that leaders and business partners are accessible to developers and vice versa. So we used to have a lot of meetings where it was like project manager and product owners and managers all sitting in a room making decisions and sharing updates on a specific product. Managers like myself who really don't have the best information to be making these decisions. And so I've really tried to reduce these and instead provide opportunities for engineers to come to those meetings if they want to, be part of that discussion, be making those decisions, asking questions, etc. I found that it's much faster to get engineers in a room to solve a complex problem than a lot of product owners sitting and trying to solve that. Because it's really disempowering, especially when someone comes back with a decision that impacts our technology team that we have to then work towards. And so I've heard from a lot of people, I want to be looped in early. I want to be part of that the vision as we define it from the start. There's an awesome story about Steve Jobs and how he would actually stop by people's desks to ask them about an incident that might have happened the previous day. So he'd stop by the engineer's desk. And I was like, man, that would be so terrifying and intimidating. But it wasn't. It was a really empowering thing that he did. And when asked about it, he said that he would do that because he didn't want to play a game of telephone. He just wanted to go straight to the person who he knew would have the best information to answer the questions. And I think that's really empowering as a leader. And so other ways we can do this is use tools like Slack. If distance is a barrier where people can just reach out to leaders and vice versa, make sure that people are accessible. Another thing we do is to have high-level leadership floor walks at Target. And so this is really fun because every quarter we have our CIO and our vice presidents come and they meet with the teams to figure out what they're working on, and the teams can demo and ask questions back and forth. And so that's been a really empowering way for the engineers to demo what they've been working on. All right, another Steve Jobs quote. It doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do, and I am a very firm believer of that. We hire amazing engineers to think creatively and build new innovative solutions. And if people are only listening to orders and taking orders, then we can't expect them to think creatively or truly own their work. All right, also tied to the theme of empowerment, and this absolutely relates to lead engineers, senior engineers, engineering managers. Try to wait for the conversation to play out before offering your idea. If you want to mentor and empower junior level developers, then allow the team to come up with those decisions themselves and help guide them. Ask questions. Don't just bring forward your ideas. And lastly, make sure that the team members know that they can disagree with you, and don't hold your ideas sacred if you've been on a team for a really long time, and try to break away from any emotional attachment you might have to those decisions that were previously made on the team. All right, so sometimes it's impossible to push things to the team, and so this is where it's really important just to provide context so that we can make sure that people understand the why. And so sometimes this is just provided like, hey, we got to do this for a financial reason or a contractual, or we have a big marketing campaign that's going into stores and we just have to back into these timelines. But absolutely make sure that people understand how their work ties into the bigger picture. And sometimes this also means providing context up to leadership. So if we need to deprioritize a business feature because we just have to resolve this tech debt, this is your job as a leader to be that person to speak to that context. Because I've learned that context is really huge to everybody regardless of your role. In feedback, people want to know the why. They want to know the reasoning and not just be told what they're doing. Number 3 is to share credit and take blame as a leader. All right, so at large companies, it is common that developers can really get lost, and people just associate, oh, Kate's team did this, or this team name did this. But I really try to associate names with accomplishments when possible. So this person worked on this feature, which enabled this big organizational initiative. Another thing is that not all recognition looks the same. Make sure you're getting to know your team members when they join and what they prefer. So some people don't want to be recognized in front of 350 people in an all-team meeting, and some people really love it. Some just prefer that direct message that said, hey, you did an awesome job on that. So make sure you're getting to know that as you onboard people. All right, next is the take blame piece as a leader. At Target, we have a process for recovering from and learning from production issues, and it's basically a morning call every single morning where we talk through any guest-facing impacts that had happened the previous day. And so the teams represent, and here's what happened, here's what we did to solve it, and here's what we learned from it. And it's actually It's a really cool process, and the culture is awesome. It's not blaming teams. It's mostly focusing on what was fixed and what can other teams learn from this mistake that was made. And so unlike my previous advice to bring developers into conversations and meetings like this, the leaders have to be the ones like taking the blame for this and representing their teams. So I don't ever bring up names here. It's my team. We are accountable as leaders. All right, so what else does this look like as a leader, in my opinion? I'm shielding the team as they troubleshoot. I'm participating in troubleshoot efforts by just saying, how can I help? What do you need? I sometimes just have to get out of the way, leading the team through an RCA, and then, like I said, speaking on behalf of the team after major incidents. Number 4 is to never devalue people in the process of delivering a solution. I've always said that my focus in my role is about the individuals and their happiness. I care about the results that we're delivering for our business, but my job is to care about and enable our engineers. And I think also this applies to all roles on a team. I've learned that when it comes to humans, abstraction is bad. We're not in assembly lines anymore, and so what someone can produce and what someone is worth at work is a lot more complex than we can safely put numbers around. Value is described in so many different ways. You know, it's not just about the number of lines of code we deliver. It's about our impact to the team and the organization and the fact that people are just getting joy out of their work. So we need to stop calling them resources, stop moving them around like they are because we're going to leave. All right, now hopefully this is ingrained into the minds of people who've worked for me by now, but there's no argument that makes this formula incorrect. I've worked with people who've just sacrificed everything for their jobs, sleep, family, relationships, and the leaders just let it happen. And so a great way to use your authority is to not incentivize or award these scary behaviors. So whether it's offering more vacation time, time off if we had a long week, supporting remote work, whatever that looks like for your organization, make sure you're fighting for that. You know, at Target, no one's going to die because of the work that we do or don't do. I'm fortunate to work for an organization where we're not saving lives. I know some of you probably are. But so sacrificing personal life and family life isn't an option to me on my teams. All right, one of my pet peeves about our culture, and I am guilty of it myself, is that the first thing we ask people is, what do you do? I think the more important question is, who are you? And obviously that's a really awkward question to ask somebody, but I think that there's a lot of ways that we can get to know the members of our team and the people that we work with. So tactically what this looks like for me is just spending a couple minutes in every single one of my one-on-ones. Ask them about their weekend, what's important to them, did they go on vacation, how is their family, how are their kids, etc. I want to learn about what makes people happy, and I share the same about myself. One of my favorite books is by Kim Scott. It's called Radical Candor. She says your job is to not provide purpose, but instead get to know your direct reports well enough to understand how each derives meaning from their work. And I truly believe that. There's so many different studies on diversity and inclusion, and I could talk for hours about the benefits of it to teams and organizations. There are so many different ways that employees think and learn and relate to others and approach their work and honestly just see the world. If finance is your thing, there's also financial benefits to having diverse organizations. You can read some stats up there. But I believe that as leaders, we have to ensure that employees are able to bring their authentic selves to work every day without question. They're going to bring their whole human self, even if we ask them not to. And instead of finding ways to fit in and spending their energy on that, I want them to spend energy on building awesome technology. And so we have to be the ones to foster and be accountable for those inclusive cultures. Cultures where people can speak up and tell me if they have an experience that wasn't inclusive. Now, I think there are some attributes where diversity doesn't make sense, and so I'll talk through some of those, and these are things that I actually look for in interviews. And the first is values. I think that if your values don't align to the organization that you're working for, you're gonna have a really hard time working there and spending energy convincing yourself that you're at the right place. The next is work ethic. I only hire motivated, driven, curious people. Obviously, you have your days off, but I need these to be your on days. Attitude. I don't hire people with bad attitudes that are gonna bring the teams down. And then past failures. I need people to talk about mistakes they've made so that we can prevent them in the future and so that other people can learn. Next is to be vulnerable and authentic as a leader. And again, this is the time where we have to use our authority to influence. Now, similar to how I expect my team to talk about their past failures, I also do the same so that I can make sure that I'm relatable and providing a good example and leading by example. along the lines of being authentic. This is actually a photo of my dad, his LinkedIn profile picture. And I was actually shocked to learn that this was his picture. He's in consulting, so finding new roles every so often. So I was like, man, how are people going to take you seriously and like want to hire you? And he's like, I don't want to work for a company that doesn't have a little humor and that can't accept me for who I am and the weird person I am. And so this really stuck with me. I know people are going to look for that organization that they feel welcome in. And so, especially knowing they can go anywhere, like let's just foster cultures that are this way. Number 6 is to prioritize and focus. Again, this applies to everybody, not just formal leaders. I did this talk actually for high school, or the short of this talk for high schoolers a couple weeks ago because I wish I had these skills a long time ago. And I don't mean to be offensive by saying I'm giving you the same tips, but I bet a lot of you also struggle with that because I found my career actually didn't really accelerate until I found the time to focus on what really matters. Because we no longer have maker schedules, we have manager schedules. Usually, 4 different overlapping meetings at a time. I'm supposed to defy the laws of physics to be in multiple places at once. But really, honestly, even if it was just packed with 1 meeting at a time, there's no time to react to fires and changes that come up that inevitably do every single day. Okay, so we gotta make sure that we're not multitasking on the important things. Multitasking causes a 10% drop in IQ, and it leads to a 40% drop in productivity. Studies show that the human brain actually can't handle more than one task at a time. We're truly single-threaded. So even though you think you're multitasking, your brain is actually just switching rapidly between tasks. So don't try to have that important one-on-one conversation on the phone while you're responding to an email, or don't write those performance reviews while you're watching The Office. Those are things I'm trying to tell myself to do. All right, and if you have a long pile of to-dos, I like to use this Eisenhower matrix, so it basically allows you to separate them into what's not important versus important, and then what's urgent and not urgent, and then you do these tasks with them. These are also my website too, some tools for this, developerfirst.com. Okay, because when you say yes to something, you are saying no to someone else. Something else. So stop signing up for so many things. This was really hard for me too because I like to, be in a lot of different places at once. I like to think back to my team and why I'm a leader. It can be really powerful to audit yourself. So look at those buckets and where you're spending your time. Are you spending on the right things? If not, then adjust. Again, this is an activity that I like to do with other leaders to say, if you had 10 hours in the week, how would you want to break them out? And would you feel comfortable reviewing those breakouts with your team and your leader and your family? So think about that. All right, number 7 is to invest in your communication skills. And honestly, the thing for me is just to stop talking. This was actually a struggle for me, especially when I got into management. When I first started my role, I would be absolutely drained just preparing for my one-on-ones. I felt like it was up to me to do all of the talking and sharing updates, sharing feedback, etc. But what I didn't realize was that these meetings were meant for the engineers to speak their minds, share their ideas, solicit feedback, and share feedback with me. Okay, so one-on-ones are hard. Those of you who are managers, they are dreading still, but they're the best part of our jobs and the most important part of our jobs. So I make sure that I prioritize them. So a couple just key checks for your one-on-ones. Make sure that they're regularly scheduled. If you're engineers right now, make sure you have one-on-ones with your bosses. Hopefully you do. Minimum every other week for 30 minutes, in my opinion. Rarely missed, so they are hard blocks on my calendars. I can move them, but I really try hard not to completely miss them that week. And then, like I said, they're focused on the team member. And so some questions to avoid that awkward silence. I honestly just ask, what's on your mind? I like this one because it says, let's talk about what matters most to you at this given moment. It's kind of fun because they don't know what you're talking about. They think you might be talking about something, and I don't know what they're going to say. So it's something just to get right to the point and say, hey, what are you thinking about this week and what can I help with? I always like to say more because context and details really matter. And then I always end my one-on-ones with how can I help you? So how can I help you this week? I love this one because I'm forcing them to make a clear and direct request to me with what I can help with. And then I'm also not assuming that I know what's best. I think a lot of our time is spent assuming what people need and just spending our time on that. And so I just like to be clear and direct. Okay, if you are a manager, I have some other fun tools for career conversations. I had a printer malfunction this morning. I usually print out copies and try to hand them out, but I'll grab you a link to these later. All right, so listen, probably biggest piece of advice is that listen without distractions. We've all been in that meeting where someone's clearly not mentally present and it feels disrespectful. And so I just encourage people to call that out. If you feel comfortable, say, hey, is another time better for you? And also, if you're not mentally present, make sure that you make that clear too. Just say, hey, I'm distracted with X, Y, and Z. Sorry if I'm not completely here, but this topic is important to me. All right, because people are our most important assets at organizations. And so we have to be tenaciously committed to the growth of each individual. I want to make it so that these problems go away, so that we have 0 people leaving due to bad managers, so that we can stand out as preferred workplaces for people to work, and then that training is required for new leaders. So let's do everything we can to be the best leaders. Thank you so much.